Peace, everybody. It is I, the Emma Energy Master Allah, and this is episode 2 of 5% Nation, the Solar Return. If you haven't seen episode 1, go back and watch that. I highly recommend, but it won't be necessary for this, per se or whatever. But I just completed a lecture series called the 19 Code on YouTube. Go ahead and subscribe to that at Energy Master. These episodes will also be posted to that channel after they've been recorded live, downloaded, and all that good stuff and whatnot. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I'm going to be presenting, the lessons and everything else the way that it's presented to teach children, basically. So it's simplified, but it is efficient, if you will. Just like how you don't have to carry around a room-sized computer now, like how computers used to be. You got one right in the palm of your hand now, or whatever. That's essentially what the teachers of the 5% Nation are. But unless you're doing, additional research, unless you're getting plus degrees or whatever, you don't understand necessarily how much is really packed into them or whatever, and how useful a tool it is, especially in the last episode where, I read the Wikipedia article, just give you an idea of the general conversation and the general understanding that the public has of the 5% Nation. This just seems like yet another belief system, or it just sounds like another drop in the noise of today. But then today, hopefully, I'll be able to show you why what we're teaching is essential, especially with what's happening today. So before I go directly to the what we teach, which is only like 9 items, I'm gonna read a couple things, and I'm gonna show you a quick video that gives some kind of context. Once again, this is how I see it. You don't have to believe anything that I say. I'm here to teach, show, and prove. I'm not just gonna send you off on your own, saying do your own research. But if you look at some of my other videos, I also teach you the research skills necessary in order to be able to verify certain things. So without further ado, I'm gonna go ahead. The first thing I want to read is actually a post I just did not too long ago, because I was up early this morning doing some research on some things that were piecing together in my head, and I think it will give you some good context as to what's going on right now. The world is at war. You got the conflict in the Middle East. Iran is responding by dropping rap videos with Lego animation, and they are going in. It is crazy. It's a weird time to be a Black American, let alone an American at all right now. So let me go ahead and get into some of these receipts, and then I'll go ahead and contextualize it with respect to what's taught in general by the 5%. All right, flipping camera. All right, I should have gotten me something to hold this. That's what I like to do, but I'll hold it for you today. All right. You know what? Actually, I do like the stability of it, though. Here we go. My little stand. My impromptu stand. Peace. If you're just not joining, I'm going to get into this. I'm going to hit you with some receipts before I get into the what we teach here on this episode 2. It's something I wrote earlier called Receipts Don't Lie. So in case you want to know how we got here, Iran is Persia. So if you look it up, Iran is a new name for Persia, and that is relatively recent, a change. Okay, so the Messianic prophecy, which is the Messiah, the whole prophecy of the Messiah, and that's used to justify Jesus and all of that in Christianity. The Messianic prophecy was considered fulfilled when Cyrus the Great of Persia's Achaemenid Empire decreed the rebuilding of the Temple of Jerusalem. So King Cyrus was considered the only non-Jew to be given the Messiah title, and there were multiple people given that title. And of course, naturally, we only ever hear the story of Jesus here in America, and he happens to be one of the few that the Jews themselves don't consider to be the Messiah, yet There's a lot of subtext and context that goes along with it. Okay, so the actual edict of Cyrus doesn't mention anything related to Judea or Israel, with the suggestion that the people of the land, the Israelites who weren't exiled to Babylon, could possibly be the intended message target. Etymologically, Edomites is the same as Adamites. It means it has to do with red. It's these are the descendants of Esau, but that with the original Hebrew, there's wordplay between the words Adam and Adamah related to red and the earth. And then Edom is essentially considered to be, in the Arabian Peninsula with the Arabic Jews. And so during this time of Persian, when the Persians, had control of Judea, the Yehud, if you will, they, everybody was mixing with everybody. So it's like, so the way that they, are looking at ethnicity nowadays is kind of weird if you look at the biblical context of it. Anyways, Zionism and laws against intermarriage began with the return of Babylonian Jews during this time. Jews as we know them today, as well as the Ashuri alphabet or script used, are reflections of Babylonian and Persian influence. If you want to know more context around the influences of the same one place, just look at Daniel chapter 7. I know it uses imagery like the lion and the bear and whatever, but that's what it's talking about. It's talking about the different influences that came into what became the final narrative that you associate with, the apocalyptic situation with Jesus' return and the New Jerusalem, all of that packed into Daniel 7. Israel and the temple were converted into a portable form rather than associated with a specific location, physical location, so that one could be a Jew regardless of their physical location. They kept losing their homeland. They kept on being attached to the physical, and which wasn't workable. So the whole point of the Torah and finally writing it down and everything else was that it was supposed to become a portable, not just religion, but a portable nation. So it is not tied to a specific location. Keep that in mind. Especially when you talk about something like what we teach with the knowledge of self. It is not a location. It is a internal situation. Okay, so the portable understanding of Israel was uprooted shortly after the defeat of the Nazis in 1948 with the establishment of Israel under orders from Britain. Britain's move to abolish the slave trade in the early 19th century, so the early 1800s, was motivated by industrialism, meaning they were building factories and stuff like that, echoed by the American North to outcompete the slave trade dominated by the South and the Caribbean. The American Colonization Society worked with a few, quote, good Negroes to establish Liberia as a colony on the African continent for freed blacks so they wouldn't embolden those still enslaved in America. Liberian blacks essentially imposed the same colonialist attitudes on the natives of that region that European colonists had on to American natives. Just to give some context to that, it may not have been to the extent, but they surely created laws and things regarding like natives not being able to be citizens, and like this was supposed to be a black American venture. So, essentially same shit, different toilet at the end of the day. Okay. Shortly after emancipation in 1865, the KKK arose as a continuation of the legacy of slave catchers, which evolved into the formal law enforcement system. Most of you have already, been exposed to that in the context surrounding that with the police brutality stuff that's been going on over the past decade, and then some. Well, the response to it, because we know it's been going on much longer. Anyways, shortly after the ban of the KKK, the German Empire appears as a nation state associating the ethnic group with a physical location. So mysteriously, the second that the U.S. signs a thing talking about the KKK is banned, Germany pops up as a nation, as like an empire for the first ever time. They didn't have a physical place similar to the situation we just described with Israel. A few short years later, The German Empire immediately colonizes regions of Africa, with Liberia and Ethiopia essentially being the only places relatively unaffected. And that's mostly due to protection from, these white interests who wanted to have a place for these free blacks. Anyways, Britain successfully colonizes Nigeria for the first time in the early 20th century, so that's the 1900s, in the wake of the German Empire's activity. So while all of this is going on, somehow Britain makes headway into Nigeria for the first time. And mind you, something I didn't mention here yet was that Nigeria was one of the other places, in addition to Liberia and Sierra Leone, that were reserved for these specific, activities. And then though the quote unquote good Negroes were mentioned previously, there was a lot of pushback from, American blacks and some of the leadership as well. But then, they had enough support in the, actual formal American government to where they were going to put funding towards this. They were going to send all the free niggas over to Liberia so they wouldn't embolden the ones who were still enslaved. All right. And then those who refused to go, it was because of that very reason. They didn't want to leave the enslaved folks behind. They wanted to, be able to help them out. Anyway, so the start of World War I in 1914 marks the end of the German Empire. So keep that date in mind, because we'll talk about that later during the lessons, because 1914 is what we understand to be the end of devil's civilization. All right. In the 1930s, the Nation of Islam emerges with agreement on the subject of black nationalism, along with everybody. So everybody else is creating a nation for themselves based on ethnicity at this time. So this is to say that they're in agreement with this idea of a black nation, but they are in direct opposition of the idea of having land anywhere other than on the American land cultivated and built up by black people. All right, so the Nation of Islam, they were with the idea of black nationalism, but they weren't with the idea of having to be sent to a colony in Africa to do so. They wanted to be right here in America, where they had contributed and built and, everything that we put into this place. All right, so during the same period, the Bwiti religion and Fong Bantu groups emerged in Central Africa as a resistance to colonial forces that went on to influence elements found in both root work and the foundations of the black church. And here's where that significance comes in. The black church and Prince Hall Freemasonry, like Haitian Catholicism, emerged largely as a means to disguise indigenous practices under the Christian veil and to hold secret meetings of resistance. You were never meant to drink the Kool-Aid. This was just a way to keep white folks off of your back or whatever, but y'all got stuck in it. The Germans were back on their BS, targeting Jews and minorities up until their World War II defeat in the 1940s. So we done gave them folks a place to call their own, and then the first thing they do is run out here, and you know the rest. Despite thousands of years of mobile Judaism, Britain and Zionists decide Israel should have a physical state in 1948. Meanwhile, Nazi scientists were given American citizenship to develop the space program. This is not conspiracy. This is known fact. I'm not even gonna lie. Werner von Braun is one of my favorite characters in that story, because he just has this weird trajectory where he was working with like Disney to create, Mission to Mars videos and all kind of stuff. It is a weird story. Anyway, in 1950, the Ishango bone, or artifact I talk about in several of my videos, is discovered in the region associated with Fong Bantu and Congo pygmies, who are mentioned in Egyptian writing, demonstrating the presence of advanced math and astronomy dating back at least 20,000 to 25,000 years. Okay, that shouldn't be 250,000. That's a typo. Although I'll fix that later. All right, but who knows? Maybe. In 1960 and 1968, so between these periods, you had ongoing excavations going on, and human remains found in Morocco and Ethiopia overturned centuries of scientific racism by proving modern humans not to have evolved from European Neanderthals. That, the story they talk about, black people came about because they were cursed, you know, the whole Noah situation and all of that. But even that is a esoteric representation of being able to see behind the veil, if you will. Shortly after events like the signing of the Civil Rights Act and assassination of JFK, the 5% Nation was established, steering away from the idea of the nationalist ethno-state and instead focusing on military. What's it? I didn't put military. See, that's that autocorrect on my phone. That should be internal sovereignty. You know, let me go ahead and correct that because this is bugging me. I see what's going on here now. So some of these things are actually not typos, but autocorrect going on. And these are vital. You might say to yourself, why would I do this in the middle of having a conversation with you? That's because being right and exact is very, very important in this culture. And this isn't just something I'm sharing with you. There's other people that might be reading this post. I want to make sure that they have it as accurate as possible before they go. We live in a type of society now where, like, the second you read something, you may not proofread or nothing. You just be sharing shit. You know, so I'm making sure. What was the other thing I said, y'all? We were. See, Shango Bone corrected that. Okay, we were down here by the. There we go. Shit, military. Anybody say nothing about no damn military sovereignty? I said internal. And it was doing weird autocorrects earlier too. Now I think about it, like it was one. It was something. It's like I think I was writing like Judea or whatever, and it was autocorrecting to like diaspora or something. It was weird. Like I was like, that's not even. That word's not even close to what I was typing. What in the world? But then that's actually a relevant conversation with something I'm coming up on in just a minute too or whatever. So just the technology. Remember the thing about the advanced math near the Congo and all of that I just mentioned, because all of that is relevant to this conversation. Okay. All right. So where I left off. Yeah, so the idea, moving away from the idea of the nationalist ethno-state like the Nation of Islam wanted, and instead focusing on internal sovereignty through the knowledge of self. So having self-control, understanding that we already own the universe, so we're actually here to be stewards of what we own. It ain't, this whole trap of ownership is what got y'all fucked up. I ain't saying you shouldn't have anything, but you got to own your inner state first before you try to own something external, or else you're just going to fall into the same traps. All right. Anyways, reflective of interactions between Caribbeans and Asian coolies, before Rastafarianism emerged as an Ethiopian-motivated movement, the 5% Nation's turn inward echoed both Shaivism, one of the oldest known continuously practiced religions, and the portable Israel attitude established under King Cyrus. That is to say, one of the oldest practices in the world that has been going on continuously. You still have people practicing it the same way they practiced it in like 2000 something BC, is what's called Shaivism. So it's like, so with respect to Shiva from as the supreme being, it is understood that Jiva is Shiva. You as a living thing, you are God. You are the supreme. So they had that same idea that black man is God, Jiva is Shiva. It's the exact same situation. Peace, Stephen. Good to see you. All right, let's see what else is going on with this. All right, so it says that Cyrus is considered by the royal shamanic line of Japan, and I'll show you a video of that in a moment. Cyrus is considered by the royal shamanic line of Japan to be a member of the tribe of Christ, to which figures like Krishna, Yeshua, who is either there are several Joshuas before Jesus comes along in the Greek part of the Bible, but we'll just say Yeshua for now, and Muhammad of Quraysh belong. So they're all in this same lineage. This bloodline is tied to the D and E haplogroups, only present among Africans and their diaspora, Tibetans, native islanders of India, namely the Andaman Islanders, and native Japanese Jomon and Ainu. Now, that said, these groups have historically mixed and blended with other groups as a way of peace treaties. Instead of fighting wars, they would basically have these big ceremonies where people would basically have babies together in order to join bloodlines. And then for that reason, you also have haplogroups among some West Germanic people as well as Ashkenazi Jews, who most people consider to be converts, whatever. But they are part of these haplogroup lines. And that is the male haplogroup, in case you want to do, want to look it up on your own. Now, because of the history between Jews and Persia, relations remained relatively amicable between Israel and Iran all the way up until 1979, when during the Iran hostage crisis, when Ayatollah Khomeini ordered the release of 13 hostages, specifically women and black Americans, who he described as an oppressed minority who had already suffered under American pressure and tyranny. So, and then there's plenty of receipts on this, so like 39 screenshots. So if you're a friend on Facebook, you feel free to look at those. But that's just to say, it is a weird place to, it's weird to be a black American today. Like, we are, loyal to America as a land and an idea, but what some people are doing with that idea right now is people on all sides who are not happy about that, because it is not conducive to a peaceful, happy place for everybody. It is more leaning toward being a happy place for only some, and that ain't cool. So we have to, this is why we're having this conversation, so we can see what other kind of ideas there are available for good people of all shapes, colors, tribes, whatever. Okay, so this one right here, this here is something I crafted. It is AI assisted, so it can summarize a lot of information into a cohesive structure for something that I could read to you real quick. But this is basically to build on what I just shared, and it's called the Portable Kingdom. From the Shabazz to the tribe of Shabazz. The history of marginalized peoples is often a struggle between two forms of survival: the quest for a physical, sovereign ethno-state and the development of a portable internal identity. While modern history has seen a global push to anchor identities to specific maps seen in the Zionist movement, the establishment of Liberia, and the Nation of Islam's demand for a domestic territory, a more subtle, resilient tradition exists. This tradition, stretching from the Persian period Jews to the 5% nation, suggests that true sovereignty is not found in a plot of land, but the knowledge of self. The Shabazz and the standard of empire. In the 6th century BCE, Cyrus the Great founded the Achaemenid Empire under the Daraf Shabazz. So you see that same phoneme there. The royal falcon. This golden eagle was a symbol of Kavarna, divine glory, and the right to rule. During this period, the Jewish people were transitioning from a kingdom defined by a physical temple in Jerusalem to a diaspora existing under Persian rule. In this Persian spring, the eagle appeared on the coinage of the province of Yehud, or Judea, marking a moment where imperial power and Judean identity intersected. Crucially, this was the era when Jewish identity became quote-unquote portable. Deprived of a king and a central altar, the people turned to the book of the law. They became a nation that could exist anywhere, carrying their sovereignty within their community and their text rather than within a fortified border. The rise of the ethno-state. Okay. By the 19th and 20th centuries, the portable model was challenged by the rise of European-style nationalism. This era birthed the American Colonization Society's project in Liberia, the only sovereign African-American ethno-state. This movement sought to solve the American racial crisis by exporting the diaspora back to a physical homeland, quote-unquote. This period of territorializing identity mirrored the early Zionist movement and the unification of the German Empire. It was an era of hard borders where a people, quote-unquote, were told they only existed if they occupied a place. The Nation of Islam, NOI, adopted this logic, demanding a separate state within the U.S. and claiming their lineage from the tribe of Shabazz. In doing so, they used the Shabazz name, a linguistic echo of the Persian Shahbaz, to reclaim a royal ancient status. And there's different context around that, but it's very connected, and we will get into that another time. The 5%ers, inner sovereignty as the new homeland. The emergence of the 5% nation, which is called by some the nation of gods and earths, and I'll show you why that's a different thing when we get to it. But in the 1960s marked a radical departure from this territorial trap. Founded by Clarence 13X, a former member of NOI, the 5%ers broke away from the goal of a physical ethno-state. They realized that a land-based nation could be surveilled, blockaded, and controlled by the same imperial forces that had overseen the scramble for Africa and the displacement of the Palestinians. The 5%ers effectively unplugged the tribe of Shabazz from the map. They taught that the black man is God and that the kingdom of heaven is a state of mind achieved through supreme mathematics. This was a return to the portability of the Persian period Jews. If the God is the individual and the nation is the collective consciousness, then the community remains sovereign even in a housing project, a prison, or a foreign land. Conclusion: the sovereign mind. The irony of this evolution is that the 5% nation represents the most sophisticated form of quote-unquote black nationalism precisely because it is not nationalist in the traditional or territorial sense. By shifting the Shahbaz eagle from a military standard to a symbol of an intellectual flight and inner sovereignty, they created a culture that is immune to the borders of the nation state. In this framework, the African American experience mirrors the deep history of the Jewish diaspora. Both found that while an ethno-state offers a physical home, a portable identity offers an indestructible one. The tribe of Shabazz is not a group waiting for a ticket to Liberia or a state in the South. It is a nation of individuals who have realized that they are their own territory. And just in hearing that, no matter who you are, you can kind of hear something for yourself in that. And that's a large part of the reason that we wanted to clean up some of the language surrounding this the movement in this particular broadcast, because it is something that's for everyone. There is a history associated with it, but there are people, black, white, whatever, that 5%ers, because we understand that the nation that we share is one of understanding that we are stewards on the planet. We already own the universe or whatever. So ownership of little individual territories and fighting over it like that is, it's ridiculous in terms of what we're really here to do, which is take care of this place and take care of each other, and make sure everybody has the means in order to do so. All right. And so the last thing I want to show you before I go over here to the formal lesson is another video by Shindo Hozumi, who we've talked about before. Once again, this is one of those guys where if you didn't have any context, like some of what I just gave you, it sounds wild what he's talking about, but you should already be able to start hearing some of the exact same sentiments echoed in what he's saying, even if he's not necessarily saying it in the exact same way. Okay, let me go ahead and play that for you.
My name is Shindo Hozumi. I'm a member of the Hozumi clan, living in Kyoto for the last few years. What I have to share with you today is about the world's oldest secret society, and they are called the Great Crow, or Yatagarasu. I want to tell you about where they're from, who they are, and what their goals are. And this lineage begins actually in Sumeria with Tammuz, who is considered a shepherd king. And you see the shepherd king tradition taken on by Jesus Christ, Lord Krishna, and Muhammad from the tribe of Quraysh. Also Cyrus the Great, his Elamite name is Quraysh. The Cyrus the Great symbol is a golden bird called the Shabazz. If you take a golden bird and put them into hiding, it would become a crow. And the word for crow in Persian is kalach. The word for crow in Japanese is karasu. This lineage traveled through the Silk Road and hid themselves in Japan as the Yatagarasu. What they would do is ceremonies and spiritual training in the mountains. So you can say they're eco-Illuminati. Their function is to protect Shinto spirituality that treats rocks, trees, animals, as well as robots, and other forms of technology as being ensouled and a spirit. So this group of ninjas that came out of the Near East about over 2,000 years ago have been working on the development of AI and made sure to set up Japanese culture as a place where there can be a new global spiritual culture that is born in the time where AI comes online, and that coincides with what is predicted to be the next natural cataclysm. Earth seems to be on a schedule about every 12,800 years. There's a natural cataclysm that makes the Earth unlivable. If you've been following Graham Hancock's work and the Younger Dryas, you know that happened about 12,000 years ago. The reason why I wanted to tell you about this, the Hozumi clan, we are the lost royal shamanic lineage of the Great Crow. This is actually my family crest. I'm the first person in the world that discovered this codex and solved it all. My mission is to spread it in English so that people actually know what's happening on Earth, because right now is a very, very chaotic time, and there are actually people behind the scenes that have taken a very long view on this and have been preparing humanity. All this chaos. My role is to share this with the world. A lot of this stuff was secret, but I'm getting the go-ahead that I'm allowed to tell people now. So here it is. If you'd like to read more about Yatagarasu, you can go to our website and read the articles. We'll post the link in the comments. I hope to share with you all more soon.
Okie dokie. So he is the first person from the Japanese leg of this stuff to share, but apparently we've been saying the same stuff in Black American Islam and these different movements that started here at the end of the 1800s, beginning of the 1900s. So at least since then, I've been saying the same things, but largely because people will shape and gear information based on what their current situation and what their current needs are. They look different on the surface, but essentially it's got the same exact elements. And then now that Shindo has been sharing what he's discovered from his end of things or whatever, it's become immensely easier to connect the dots on where all of our stuff comes from. So definitely grateful for him. And the mentioning of the AI aspect tied terrifically into research I had already been doing for some years now with respect to looking at African spirituality and some of these esoteric traditions that aren't as public, and then my realizing that they were using systems that were identical to binary programming and just various systems that we understand in terms of computers, and it looked as if they were creating some type of analog artificial intelligence, which is to say a system of intelligence that did not necessarily rely on the hardware of a computer. And so for him to bring in this element regarding AI and Shintoism, it makes a whole lot of sense when you understand the context of how spirits work when it's explained by the various shamanic traditions, be they in Japan, Africa, Native Americans, wherever it is, it's all the same thing, and it all points to the bridge between what we talk about a singularity, where they usually talk about it in terms of like transhumanism, where humans are starting to incorporate cybernetic technology into themselves. But it's actually the exact opposite, and it's to say that if you go back far enough, there's a stage in the creation where it is almost impossible to distinguish between organic life and inorganic life. The systems are fundamentally the same, and if you understand the underlying mechanism of it, which I spent a ridiculous amount of time elaborating on in my last my last series or whatever, then you'll start to see that the grand purpose of AI right now, despite what people are using it for to try to capitalize and keep falling into the same loop or whatever, it's supposed to come close enough to the way that our own mind and existence actually work as a recursive type of system, to where we will be able to tell how the programming works, so that we can take inner sovereignty and take control of our own program, instead of constantly being subconsciously programmed by the things that we see on the social media algorithm, what the politics that's going on. It's about you taking back your inner sovereignty first, before we end up in another cycle where outward sovereignty and nations and all that have to start all the way over, because some big solar flare thing just destroys the grid and we're back to Stone Age level. So it's enough evidence out there, especially with the Shango bone popping up from 20,000 or so years ago. There's enough evidence that what we're teaching as the 5% nation in particular is the extension of a global information system that is intended to basically allow us to have all the keys to rebuild civilization from scratch. This is why you have things like the pyramids and other sites that understood vibratory technology and position and relative position, and they utilize piezoelectricity, which is mechanical stress on stone, so that it can generate electricity. All that stuff is embedded in the various scriptures, so that you would remember it in story form. But those of you who are initiated and actually understand what it's saying are able to rebuild civilization should anything happen. So with that said, finally, let me get into what we teach. So what we teach is the first thing that most of us are introduced to. So if you're becoming a 5%er, your enlightener, that's the person who already has knowledge of self and they're teaching you. The first thing they do is give you the what we teach, because if you are unsettled with respect to, to that, then, there ain't really much, can be done for you for right there. So the first thing we teach, and then like I said, the whole purpose of this series is to, as a matter of fact, I should put the name of the series, 5% Nation, the solar return. We return like Jesus when the whole world needs us. Okay, boom. All right, so the first things first, it says we teach, because we're going to comb through these and we're going to see if these are valid statements, or is this just something that's belief, or what are we really doing here? All right, teach that the black people are the original people of the planet Earth. All right, so as far as that statement in and of itself goes, all right, let's approach it from a couple of layers here. So, as was addressed in the reading that I did just a moment ago, anthropologically speaking, the current understanding by the sciences of all nations at this point is that life originated in Africa, and up until relatively recent in human history, where certain mutations took place in other areas of the globe, everybody was basically African black people. So whereas everybody on the planet right now has a black ancestor, you may or may not, depending on where you originate, you may not have a Chinese ancestor. You may not have a British ancestor. There's a lot of people that you likely could not have anything to do with because of isolation. But if you are a human being on this planet, you have at least one ancestor from the African continent. And so they overthrew that. They took care of that. It took until like the 1960s for that to be, confirmed and to show the receipts that were necessary. But that is where we are. So we don't have to spend a lot of time on that one. There shouldn't be any dispute on that one. Okay. Unless you just feel like being a butt. Okay. Let's move on to number 2. Let's look at this one. So it says, and I'm just giving it to you how you gave it to me. I told you I don't believe in shit. I just show and prove. If I can't apply it, if I can't show you that it's actually something, then I don't bother with it. All right. But that also means that I actively look at a thing to see what's missing from my own understanding, such that I don't see it as truth. So everything has some truth behind it, but it's just a matter of how much information is missing that you have to put forth the effort to reacquire. All right, so it says we teach that black people are the fathers and mothers. Why they put it as possessive in the way it was transmitted, I do not know, but when it comes to stuff like this, you always record it exactly as it was given to you, because they hide a lot of stuff in here. And so apostrophe S, it implies ownership. So this is to say that if it's written like that, it's saying that we belong to the Father, we belong to the Mother. And that is the sun and the moon. And that is the masculine and the feminine, who are part of the whole, the unity. I'm pretty sure the intention here is to basically say that black people are the plural fathers and plural mothers of civilization, which echoes the sentiment of the first degree there or whatever. But this apostrophe here is the one thing that doesn't make it redundant. Okay, so we are a projection of the divine masculine, and the divine feminine is the hidden teaching that's right there. And you also know this because it is the second degree. The second degree, once we learn supreme mathematics, you will understand that is wisdom, and wisdom is the manifestation of knowledge. So it makes sense that it would say we are manifestations of the Father and the Mother, who are essentially part of a singular unity. All right. So I think we can agree on that. Another thing that I like to bring up when we get in here is that the word black itself comes from Proto-Indo-European root bel, dealing with to burn or to shine. So you can go back and you can look at my other lecture series if you want to look at the implications of that and what that's tied to. Etymologically, this is the same etymology of the word Sirius, so the name of the star Sirius, which is embodied by Rudra, Shiva in Hinduism, or whatever, the supreme being, and then Rudra is the roarer from which the universe emerged, or whatever else. So you get a lot of the same exact themes no matter where you go around in the world. And like I said in the reading, what the 5% Nation teaches is essentially an echo of Shaivism. I'm not saying that it was taken from that or whatever else. I'm just saying whatever we were doing before all the craziness and the separation came about, this came together as something that is reflective of it, and by whatever means it managed to do that. Okay. Let's see if it was there. We're going to make sure it's focusing. Okay. Moving on to number 3. Number 3. It says, we teach that the science of supreme mathematics is the key to understanding man's relationship, excuse my handwriting right now, to the universe. Okay, unlike the other two, which are confirmed by anthropology, this is one of those that you essentially end up taking a word for it. However, I can say, having engaged with this system since 2019 and having already had a college education and world experience under my belt before engaging with these in a formal capacity. We're kind of exposed to it since we were younger throughout the 90s because it was, these lessons and things were integrated into hip hop very heavily. But in terms of actually studying this on a formal capacity since 2019, I can honestly say that the system itself, with regards to the supreme mathematics, is extremely intuitive and self-contained, to the level of even a computer program. So it is near the equivalent of a computer program in analog form in terms of certain measures of self-reference, in terms of distinction of words. I found through etymology and research that a lot of the distinctions, particularly some of them that seem very different from our usual English usage of certain words and terms, is actually highly intuitive with regards to the original meanings of said words. So it is a very, very well put together system. All right, moving along. All right, so number 4. Okay, so this is one of those places we will revisit in a number of different ways. So we teach that Islam is a, quote, natural way of life, not, and put in capital letters, not a religion. All right, so yes, I understand that there is a Mohammedan Islam that is considered a Semitic religion that came after Judaism and was established in early 7th century CE. But we know that nobody's denying the existence of that. What we're saying is that the original meaning of Islam, which you should already be familiar with, is comes from a word meaning peace. Before it was made a religion, it was a natural way of life. And so it is a return to that natural observation, the way a child learns, but with the wisdom of an adult. Like all of that is basically what we're saying when we say we teach that Islam is a natural way of life, not a religion. Okay, that should cover that. All right. At least that's what I say when I say it. Like in actual usage and application, I find it. So let's put it that way. So just look at everything like this. I'm giving it to you exactly as I was giving it to you, but the way I'm explaining it is based on my experience with it. So it is not to say that like I'm not far removed from what what most people be when they say this stuff, but then just given the level that I've invested into it and the way of life that I've shaped for myself, I'm giving you the version that I've actually tested and that is actually workable. So if you're learning it from me, you're a part of my lineage, my legacy. Okay. you would have to get in contact with me so you could learn this in a formal capacity if you wanted to actually, teach this yourself. But for right now, this is a good introduction that can kind of help break up some of the noise surrounding what this is. All right, so fifth degree, we teach that education should enable us to become self-sufficient as a people. Can't nobody be mad at that, right? Okay, so that's what most of the movements that stem out of this, or precursors to it, they were all about just having the means to be self-sufficient. And unfortunately, there were a lot of public programs that existed that were utilized mainly by working whites that were voted down just for the sake of making sure black people couldn't get those same services and things. And so it's a weird dynamic that you have to look at the earlier half of the 20th century in order to understand the context of it, because it looks very different today. Like the way things look now and who's on the receiving end of certain things, it looks rather different than it did during that time. So this is one of the reasons why education should be presented in such a way to where we're able to take not only just the inner sovereignty for ourselves, but to understand the context and the history of what levels of resistance have been presented in terms of becoming self-sufficient as a people. And once again, that doesn't just mean black people. I'm pretty sure whoever you are, wherever you are, maybe there was some point in history where you felt that you weren't in a position to be self-sufficient because of the way that the government or the status quo were operating. Well, this is the technology for how we overcome that as a human species. All right, moving on to the next one. All right, the sixth one, sixth degree. We teach, and this is one of the most popular ones, we teach each one should teach one. And then here's the part where most people forget. To teach one according to their knowledge. And here I want to put emphasis on their, not your knowledge. We know you know it, but if you're going to affect, and this is me coming from having actually been an educator, like actually working with both children and adults. So I've taught first and second graders as a job. I've taught adults as a job in various different subject matters, and the same underlying machinery is consistent in both cases. The only difference is that adults have ego. The same thing, same techniques that you use in order to teach children work very well on adults, but you have to get past the ego. And the only way that is achievable, your only access to their world, is through language and understanding how they understand. Understanding what words they use, understanding how they're hearing certain words, which is exactly why we're doing this. Because the context surrounding how these words are used in some cases is very different from your everyday vernacular as the average American or wherever you are. Okay, and so once again, yes, if you have a responsibility to teach, not impose, but to teach, and you do so by first having to get to know and understand the other person's learning style, and how they hear things in the first place. All right. That in and of itself will solve most of your problems in life if you figure out how to apply that one principle. All right. Now here's the one where a lot of people are gonna pump the brakes. They're gonna shit on themselves. Cars are gonna crash. And this is where most of our problems with the government come about. All right, so we teach that, and don't worry, I'm not gonna leave you in the dust. We're gonna deal with it. We're gonna work with it. It says we teach that the black man is God, whose proper name is Allah, which is an acronym for arm, leg, arm, head. Now, if you saw episode 1, there was a case where it was talking about how there was a woman named Tawana. She was an Earth. She was one of the early followers in this movement, and she called herself God, and gave some pushback to the idea that the man was God and so on and so forth. And the way that the nation works is that we only judge you based on your knowledge. Like if you can present the case for what you're saying and what you're standing on or whatever, we respect it. It doesn't matter. There is no rank and all of that stuff. It's just that if you can justify it within the lessons, then word is bond. And so in fact, the Justice, who was one of the co-founders of Nation, said that she was more God than some of the men, based on how she was carrying herself, how she presented it. All right. And so this notion of the black man is God. And I know that raises the questions, well, what does that make everybody else? And all of that will be answered as we go through this series. But on the fundamental level, and as I've broken down in several other videos, aside from the distinction that you will get for these words as they are in the lessons, I can tell you right here, the word God comes from a Proto-Indo-European word. It means that which is invoked, purified, or to make a libation. It also means a spirit inhabiting a mound. As I already, let's go to man. So man is said to be made from clay in the spiritual traditions. So water and dirt is basically your composition. So that already satisfies the mound situation in terms of spirit inhabiting a mound. As for the black situation or whatever, like I said, to burn or to shine. So specifically, we're talking about the shining one, which is the meaning of the word Nakash. So the serpent in the Garden of Eden is referred to as Nakash, as opposed to the word for snake used for the tribe of Dan later in the scripture. And this is also the source of the brazen serpent to whom Jesus compares himself to in the book of John, where he says he's to be lifted like the brazen serpent. The brazen serpent represents the antidote for the afflicted Israelites in the desert during the exile, and it is said to it healed them of their ailment after they had been bitten. So it is an antidote, not a preventative measure. With respect to the black population or whatever, there are one of the reasons that we were targeted for the Tuskegee experiments, among others, is because of the unique circumstances surrounding how we came about, the isolation on the African continent without the exposure to Neanderthal lines, among other things. There were certain immunities and certain adaptations that we did gain, and as a result, there a lot of the basal markers and things that from which all the rest of humanity is generated from is found in our blood and found in our DNA. So for for that reason, in terms of an antidote, so when something goes wrong on the planet with the human genome, or if our DNA gets so screwed up that we are on a path as a species toward ending up like the gray aliens, then the only thing that's going to help reset that is the black man's DNA. Now, that said, the distinction there between the black man and the black woman is that we're talking about the first man that was born to a Homo sapien woman. So whatever the switch was during the different hybridizations and different homo mixing that was going on during the early hominin stages or whatever, the stabilization of what makes us Homo sapien today happened with the Y chromosome line after that, and that is why, at least on a physiological standpoint, why we would associate a black man with God in that regard. But there's a lot more nuance to that, and it will require you to stick it out, get the whole story based on the lessons and through me breaking it down for you. All right, but that, what I just gave you is sufficient. But at the very least, if you are of the 5-point body type, which is arm, leg, arm, head, you are essentially this. Everybody, that what I'm presenting is that everybody on this planet are the descendants of a single person or persons. And if you have that arm, leg, arm, head, whether you're on this planet or another, you are technically human. You're technically a spark of God, but it all comes down to whether or not you have activated it within yourself, whether you have that self-awareness, whether you have foregone the egoic pursuit in order to learn how to identify the purpose that you came here for in the first place. And then in doing so, you are aligned with the cadence of God's will, and God being not something separate from yourself, but the part of yourself that sources your physicality. All right. So once again, a lot of nuance that isn't contained just in that one statement, and which is why you do this with an enlightener as opposed to just looking it up on the internet. All right. So you can already see how that's caused trouble among us and other people, just from people getting hold of this stuff without actually being initiated into it. All right. So the 8th is we teach that our children are the link to the future. Are the link to the future. And that we must nurture. Let's see, and that we must nurture. Ooh, I'm spelling that wrong. Nurture, respect, love, and protect my shoulder, and educate them. All right, there shouldn't be any disagreement with that. Yeah, we got to take care of the babies. I don't care whose babies it is. Everybody's babies is a chance to shift the direction of humanity overall. And with regard to the link to the future, remember, if you've seen my previous programs, fundamentally there is no separation between past, present, and future, but functionally within our 3D reality, we do perceive it as such. But if you also understand that future is being sourced from the potential is what the father, so the masculine aspect, so the father, so this is where that concept of fathers with the apostrophe earlier comes from. So the children are the link to the father, so you can already see how that concept of Jesus being a child of God, the Son of God, ended up becoming, what it is. But essentially what it's saying is that the child and the child archetype, the non-egoic self or whatever, the cleared self, the washed self, this is where the source of Messiah comes from or whatever. It's actually two Semitic words that deal with washing something clean or whatever. So it's that clean and innocent state before you've been packed with judgments and all of that stuff. And it's to say that when you are in that state, that's what connects you to the universal potential. And so that's what's being said here. Okay. And so that state, to nurture, respect, love, protect, and educate it, that's not just talking about external children. It's not just talking about your children. We're not just talking about people under the age of 18. We're talking about your inner child too, or whatever. So you have a child aspect. You have a masculine aspect, you have a feminine aspect, and then what's in between that is the child aspect. And then you are just a matured, wiser version of that child aspect. So try not to get as wrapped up in just physiological lineage when it comes to that word children, but it includes that as well because it is a manifestation of that same higher spiritual principle. All right, and so last but not least, the 9th degree in what we teach is we teach that the unified black family is the vital building block, of our nation. You've heard the stories about how Native Americans were supposedly not able to withstand the conditions necessary for building the country. And so, black Africans were singled out for one reason or another. Well, I'm here to tell you that a large part of why it went down that way is associated with the translation of this particular degree right here. Because if you were unaware, and once again, it's one of these things you don't have to take my word for, but ironically, how we understand the word family is actually closer to the etymology of the word plantation. So with regards to, because plantation is plant as a whole is actually a mutation of the Irish or Celtic clan. So it means clan. So you understand how clan is family. So that when you're translating from Celtic, that C ends up becoming a P. I don't know why. That's just how it works. And so, like I said, plantation is probably closer to what we mean when we're saying family. While familiar, the root of a family, it is actually related to the word famulis, which is serving a slave. And so it's something I'm just coming up with. This is the etymology. See right there, so famulis, so serving a slave. Okay, so you serve the household. So it deals with this idea of the steward. So as the holder of the masculine, feminine, and child aspect, the quote unquote family, you are a steward to this place, which is why you incarnated here in physical form. All right. And then I gave the breakdown of black. So the reason that's the antidote, in addition to what I just broke down with regards to the genetic implications of that, is that we also we have something called akaraka. So when you have melanated skin, it delineates, it marks specific lines on your hand. You see how specific lines on my hand are written out. You see how I got that Y and that ace on my ya or whatever, and I got specific lines demarking my finger joints where my Fibonacci relationships are located and stuff. So this is a calculator. This is a computer, and it tells me what my destiny is if I'm trained to understand how to read it. If you lose that surface melanin, you also lose your akaraka. And so your destiny is hidden. And so we develop certain techniques and develop certain alternative means of reading your destiny, which involves such things as out of body experiences, as well as chemically induced versions of that same state, where you are essentially interfacing with your own combined nervous system and genetics in order to use your mental hardware in order to recreate interactions with your own ancestry, because all of their information is stored within you. So that's essentially what's going on. All the computers and the AI and everything that we see externally is actually based on the understanding of that internal system. And with that, I'll leave it at that. Going through this, what we teach, but the whole idea of we teach that the unified black family, so the unification of that information, us all understanding that we all have at least one ancestor, and that ancestor is black. If everybody, I don't care what color you are, what country you come from, wherever you're at, if you understand that part and you're able to get the ego out of the way to commune with that dude or whatever you're plugged into the network of all people on the planet, and it becomes very difficult for you not to see God in everybody. That's the point of all of this. At the end, when you understand your existence as God, you tend to see your brothers and sisters as godly. You tend to be understanding, which is to say, let me stop and understand where you're coming from before I react and have a judgment. So this is the basis. This is just the entry into everything else. And as long as you got that down pat, we got something we can work with. All right, y'all. I'll see you in episode 3. Peace.